Took a long time to get here. Go ahead, punch it in.
Whoa.
Welcome to the bunker.
Type of thing with chemtrail and all that, but we're going to talk about the hurricane season, right?
Yeah, it is June. It is officially hurricane season out here on the east coast of the hood. And with as weird as the weather it has already been this year, I think it's going to be a wonky storm season. And hurricanes are, I mean, we have hurricanes out here, but there are major storms across the U.S. like all the time and around the world. Like anybody who has ever experienced a tornado or any kind of massive storm surge where, a significant amount of rain has fallen in a short amount of time and all those kinds of things, it's the same sort of thing. So it's like, we'll talk about hurricanes, but it's also about storms in general, very, very specifically having to do with excessive amounts of water, and which will definitely kill you. So, yeah.
And we're going into that 2026 season now, which starts right about now, right, and ends somewhere around November. I think I'm just going from memory here, but I think peak season is somewhere around like September 1st or August, September, somewhere in there is peak season.
Yeah, it's August, September timeframe.
It always sort of surprised me because September, I always think of September as being like the beginning of fall, that sort of thing. And, but it was slightly cooler, this and that, but that's when those storms really start to pick up. Why don't we talk about just historically, what do you know about the Helene hurricane situation?
Well, I can tell you from personal experience, and if you guys have not listened to that particular episode, it was, I think, literally like one or like maybe two or three episodes into when we brought the show back. My mother and I were traveling in the western part of North Carolina, and we knew there was going to be a storm. But it's the mountains. That kind of thing should not occur there. And
how far inland are you and where you're talking about?
Well, I live central North Carolina. Let's just say it takes me about 3 to 3.5 hours to get to the coast.
Okay.
So,
all right.
But equidistance, it's about 3.5 hours to the mountains. So we're like not quite smack in the center, but almost a little bit further south. So to get to South Carolina per se, it's like to the border, I want to say like an hour to an hour and a half, maybe 2 hours at max. But so we were traveling up there, and
the reason why, and I'm sorry, I don't mean to cut you off again. The reason why I was saying that is because a lot of people think hurricane, you think of coast, you think of the beach, you think of the Florida coast or the Gulf of Mexico. They don't think about inland, in the mountains.
Yeah, and a lot of people, like, for instance, they think about Florida, they think about South Carolina, they think about, Louisiana, all those kinds of things.
I've been in 2 hurricanes straight on in my life while I lived in Florida. I mean, we're talking right in the middle of them. I went outside and looked up into the eye of 2 hurricanes when I lived in Florida. And that's what you think about. You think about tropical or you think about beaches. But these things are massive storms that hit the coastline. Now they do diminish in strength a little bit when they hit the shore. That does happen because they're fed by the warm water of the oceans. But that doesn't mean that they stop.
No, No, and there's the brunt of the hurricane, when it hits, there's the force of the wind, and a lot of the damage that comes along the coastline itself is actually from sea swell. It's from the waves, it's from the rising water that comes onto the shoreline. That whenever that dude from the Weather Channel shows up somewhere, it's going to be bad. So
you're talking about the bald guy?
Yeah, that
what's
guy.
His,
I don't know.
He's got an Italian
douche.
name.
I don't know. He's a douchebag. I mean, have you ever seen the clip where he's acting like he's holding on to his hat and two people they cruise by while they're jogging and he's
yeah.
Damn it.
He's like, the wind is so tough, I can't even stand. And like two people just walk past him.
But so when people think about storm, Jim, is it Cantori?
Cantori, that's it. Yes.
Yeah, that's something like that. Anyway, so when people think about storms, they think about the stuff they see on TV, and a lot of people, they go back and they think about what happened to New Orleans, and they that's what people picture. The thing is that as the eye moves along, and it's a lot of times the eye will hang out like off the coast. And what people don't think about is the traditional rotation of the storms themselves. So the warm water, as it warms up throughout the summer, right, and it's interacting with warm water below and cold water or cold air above, it's almost the same effect as a tornado. So a tornado is caused by two slipping fronts, warm and cold, when they meet against each other. Warm air rises, cold air sinks.
Convection.
Yeah, so it creates sort of a resistance against each other, and all of a sudden it starts to form. And on the north side of the eye, while it's rotating, that rotation, that is actually where a tremendous amount of wind is developed. So imagine like you have a heavy object tied to a string and you're swinging it, right? And as you're swinging it and it comes up to that top part and it loses a little bit of momentum, but all of a sudden it gains it when it comes back around. That's the same kind of effect, but just now spread that out over hundreds of miles. So as they come up here, a lot of times what ends up happening is, it's always a threat to the tip of Florida, and it'll come up and it'll kind of like skirt along that side. And then for some strange reason, and I don't know all the science behind it, but it's almost like it kind of like bounces off a little bit, and then it comes right back into North and South Carolina. And then you've got Georgia in between. And I mean, I have been on the East Coast quite a bit for, several years. And it's never fun. And some are, not as battering. Some are a little bit more. But I learned a few different phrases back during 17 and 18. That there is a phrase called wind-driven rain. And, you have rain. There's a lot of rain every single hurricane. And as the wind is pushing that rain, it's almost like I don't know how to describe it, but it's like little needles. And I had to learn that phrase because that's what was hitting our house primarily in 17 and 18. And it caused a lot of damage. It caused a lot of
it's
flooding.
Kind of like a pressure washer.
Yeah. Now imagine that hitting against your house.
Mm-hmm.
And as the water is hitting against your house, it only has one direction to go. And it is going directly down into, and for us, we have a crawl space. Most of the houses here, unfortunately, they have crawl spaces. And it caused
pier and beam, aren't they? Pier and beam.
Is that a construction phrase?
Yeah. So you can actually get under the house and work on. There's the pipes and stuff are all down there, as opposed to like, let's say Texas or something where you have slabs. And up north, yeah.
Yeah, when I moved here and I figured out what a crawl space was, I was confused because I'm from Texas, and I was like, "What the heck is a what is a crawl space?"
You're used to having cement under your feet.
Yeah, yeah. But I also come from an area where the majority of what is underneath you is actually water.
Right.
Yeah.
And me growing up up like in New Jersey, New York, and that sort of area, everybody has a basement. So when you come down to like Florida and Texas, you're like, where are the basements? There are no basements. No such thing as a basement in Texas. They don't have basements.
Yeah, I mean, because I'm from San Antonio originally, and we have the Edwards Aquifer up underneath the city,
right?
And that's where the majority of drinking water comes from in San Antonio and the surrounding area. So the wind driven rain, the wind itself, and just you have to understand that when these storms come on land and they're kind of moving through, all of a sudden they get ground down to a very, very slow speed. And while the wind may decrease, the rain is just there. It's a constant thing. And one of the issues that happened when Helene hit is, again, you're talking about a storm that 1 in a million chance, of course, driven by the CIA, got pulled up into the mountains.
Oops.
Yeah, exactly. It got up there. The wind was horrendous. And again, me and my mother were trapped up there. And I remember watching from the upper deck of this hotel that we were in. And I could remember looking in the distance across the Blue Ridge and seeing radio towers go down. That's how hard the wind was hitting, but we were, again, at altitude. So imagine the regular wind of a hurricane on, say, like the coastline, and now it's being pushed upwards against a mountain range.
Mm-hmm.
So it was pretty incredible to see that. And then the rain, it was insane. Now on a flat land, that amount of rain would definitely, cause, flooding.
Floods.
But imagine the fact that all of that same amount of rain was stalled out, for many, many hours, but it was flowing down the mountains, and then water travels, with the path of least resistance. And there was still to this day, an unknown amount of damage and death caused by that flooding. It was apocalyptic, to be quite honest. It was my very own SHTF situation. And I was completely caught off guard, and I was completely ill-equipped. So that's definitely one of the things that we want to talk about on this particular episode. And it kind of sucks because this could potentially be like, I mean, it could be several episodes, but we're going to try and, squeeze it in as much as we can. But one of the things that was a lesson learned, for me personally, was the fact that, well, one, I didn't have anything necessarily with me except for a gun, a pocket knife, an extra magazine, and then just my own knowledge. I did not have any radios. I did not have first aid. I did not have, well, I had a small first aid kit, but nothing major. I didn't have any of the things that we preach about many, many, many times about what you should, have. And then, so one of the things that I've been looking up here, the past couple of days, and again, these are official government websites, like for instance, NOAA. And if you don't know what NOAA is, it's the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration. Ready.gov. They have a pretty good list of stuff that you can, utilize. Redcross.org. And then when I started doing a little bit of a deeper dive, I started looking into who gets affected by hurricanes every single time. University of Florida actually has a dedicated portion of their website just to hurricane preparedness for their students, faculty, and whatnot. And is there's a huge military presence down in Florida as well. US SOCOM has their own website dedicated to the preparedness of different locations like MacDill Air Force Base, and some other installations in that area. Because the soldiers and sailors, Navy, everybody who's stationed down there has to be prepared, one, to evacuate, but two, to potentially help with recovery. So, one of the things that all of these websites have in common is to have like a checklist, like an actual checklist of stuff that you're going to potentially need for these particular storms. And there's a before the storm preparedness, and there's the during the storm, and then there's the after the storm. So before the storm takes place,
I would argue to say that there's also a before the storm, which is right now, because what you don't want to do is wait until you hear the named storms pop up. And then now you have hours or maybe a day or hours before you have to start getting stuff right. Maybe you don't have the stuff and you think, well, I'll just get on Amazon. Okay, well, Amazon might be 3 or 4 or 5 days. By then, the storm could be already past you.
Yeah.
Now's the time to start thinking about it.
Yeah. And you got to think, we're a preparedness, podcast, and preparedness it's a lifestyle. It is a lived thing. Before hurricane season even, gets ready to start. And this is also, unfortunately, when people like stores take advantage of it and they know you're going to want it and need it, and they're going to jack their prices up. Buy your stuff at the end of the year or going into winter when everything goes on clearance or goes on sale. That's what I do, so, and again, your time to prepare was yesterday. And if you didn't do it yesterday, the time to prepare is now. So, you're before the storm, like preparation in your mind that you should have. You need to start gathering your emergency supplies, and that's what we talk about all the time. You know what I mean? And then you got to think about your outside stuff. Anything that is outside becomes a movable object. And if it's a movable object in an intense enough storm, it becomes a freaking missile. So imagine, your outdoor furniture, your outdoor couch, all of a sudden moving at 60 miles an hour. Trampolines. Oh, dude, I hate trampolines. I hate them so much. They fly
like from one state to another.
Oh my gosh,
it's crazy.
Man. They're a bouncing parachute of death. I hate those things so much.
Yeah, it's a parachute with like 6 sharp spears on each side of it.
Yeah, exactly. Oh man, I hate those things so much. And it's not just because of that, because like my kids could never just bounce on the damn thing. They're out there and it was always a physical injury that took place on that stupid trampoline. So
something else to be prepared for.
Yeah. So what we do here at my house is I have a small bin that is nothing but cordage and ratchet straps. And what we do is, as we learn about storms that are coming our way, we actually gather up our outdoor furniture. We bring it onto our deck and we actually lash our furniture to the railings of our deck. So, because my deck itself, I've got 6x6s that are in the ground, and they're in the ground 4.5 feet. So I know that my deck itself is not going to go anywhere.
There ain't no hurricane wind taking that down.
No, no, we over constructed our deck. It's probably the safest spot during some of these storms, but we actually take all of our outside stuff and we lash it down to the deck itself. We put our cushions and stuff in like a watertight box or whatever, but the most important thing is we don't want a big chunk of metal slung across our yard into somebody's roof at 60 miles an hour. So, and I can say that some of the storms that we have been in here in my house, we've had sustained winds at 60, and I've actually had wind gusts here in our yard up to 80 miles an hour. So, and again, a lot of people think, well, how would that occur if you're 3.5 hours from the coast? These storms, because as they're coming up and we're on the north side of the eye, it sucks, man. It's brutal. So you got to think about those kinds of things. And as far as like the movement piece, like those are some of the major things that you need to be thinking about. Now during the storm, and a lot of people, I don't know why they don't do this, but they don't unplug their major appliances. They don't turn off portions of their breaker box. These things are important. And also, you got to monitor your gas. If you do have gas at your house, you have to monitor that, because if something major were to happen to the structure of your home and your gas is still on and operating, and any of those pipes happen to be hit or broken or any kind of leak, they can cause a major problem, because as soon as you go to turn it back on, any kind of electrical interference with that gas, if it's created a vapor, could be, a huge explosion. We don't want that. Then after the storm, of course, you gotta, we're surrounded by power lines, unfortunately. You really have to start looking for those. They're bigger than people think, but a power line itself is kind of just this flimsy, sort of flappy wire, and the things that are holding them up, you look up at them and you're like, oh, that's not that big. They're sizable, but they're not huge. The problem is that they've got a lot of voltage and amperage running through them. And if they pop loose and there's still a current active and those things hit the ground after it's been raining, you're just asking to get electrocuted. And those will definitely kill you.
That's a good point.
Yeah,
that much.
People, I don't know why people, it's like a magnet. They see a down power line and they want to go look at it. Stay the hell away from that thing and call it in. Like, report it. Don't go near it. Don't drive over it. Don't go touching it. Don't try to do the right thing and move it out of the road. Leave that for a professional. That's what they're there for. They know how to handle those things. But yeah, stay away from power lines. And the electricity itself can actually run through the ground, 35, 45, 55 feet, especially in wet conditions. You have to think of electricity as kind of like water. Electricity will run along the path of least resistance. So until it meets a resistor that's enough to stop it, it's going to continue to flow. You got to check for electrical damage inside of your house. Frayed wires, sparks, smell of burning insulation. Check your meter box and make sure that if it's still moving. And if you think that there's any kind of damage to your actual meter box itself, or you start to smell something funky, don't turn your power back on. If you're trying to run a generator to your home, make sure, one, that you know how to do it. Two, and if anybody doesn't know what I mean by that, if you have a strong enough generator, you can actually backload your electricity, and it requires for everything else to be turned off, and your generator becomes the primary source of electrical current going into the home. For most, gas operated or dual fuel generators, you can actually create basically you take a long cord, and it almost looks like an RV cord, and you can take the end off of it, and you can actually put a new pigtail on there for the same as your dryer, and you can actually backload your electrical current through that. But you got to know what you're doing, and you have to realize. You
completely lost me. What are you talking about?
So you can actually, like for my generator that I have, right? I have a gas operated generator.
Okay. Yep.
It's the same concept as if you had an in-home generator that kicked on immediately. You know what I mean? But instead of a whole house generator that kicks on if your power goes out, you have to make sure that all your power is off. And then you actually you take a long, basically the same thickness gauge as an RV, power cord. And that power cord is the same 30 amp power cord that gets plugged into your dryer. So you can take the end off of the original cord, put a dryer plug on that end, and it's called pigtailing. And then you actually connect that to your generator and then put it into the dryer outlet. And that actually pushes, because it's a reverse You're pushing power in
Oh,
through.
I see what you're saying. Yeah. Okay, gotcha.
You're pushing power into that particular you're at that outlet. And what I do is I only need it just to run the refrigerator and then the outdoor freezer. That's really all I'm looking for. And if I can, I'll try to reconnect the internet, but it's not like the most immediate thing. So that's what you can backfill your generator or your backfill your electricity that particular way. So, but you really do need to learn how to do it first before
It's really
you just
what you're talking about is really quite dangerous. I was an electrician for years, and
yeah,
it's not something that normal people do. But what you're saying is like a home generator system that connects to your house. When the power goes out, it immediately, within a fraction of a second, it immediately turns on. But it also disconnects your house in case the power comes back on. So when it does come back on, it's able to jump back over to it safely. If you were to add electricity to your house while there was electricity coming into your house, you're fucked.
Yeah, that's why you have to make sure
stuff's going to start
that
blowing up and catching on fire.
Yeah, that's why you have to make sure that everything else, like you have to go to your box and you have to turn off everything else.
Right.
And then you backfill your electricity that particular way. That's how you do it. And the other part about that is, and I don't want to go too deep, but the other part about that is if you are backfilling your electricity with a generator, you don't want to use that generator for too much more other than that. And what ends up happening is you're either going to do one of two things. If you don't have enough, if you're not putting enough of a load on your generator, you end up with having a problem called wet stacking. Wet stacking is that the generator is pushing out more power than is being consumed. So it'll damage your generator over time. The other side of that is you put too much load on it and it's overloading and it's not able to keep up with the consumption. So that's why you want to have limited usage off of it, just the generics of the things that you absolutely need. So that's one of the things that we do. So
yeah, that's interesting. And I think in most cases, in a really bad hurricane, and your power goes out, it's going to be a while before the power comes back on. But for normal situations when the power goes out, your refrigerators and freezers are very capable of holding that cold, as long as you don't open them too much, holding that cold for days. It's okay for a while, as long as you don't open the doors unnecessarily.
Yeah. And again, going back to my own experience, there at the hotel, the power went out that evening. And then, I got up because my mom came and got me and she's like, hey, there's something going on. And before we lost all cell signal, there was like alert. I didn't wake up, I had a couple drinks, but and the next morning when I got up and it was still hitting really hard, the managers of the hotel and I started talking just to kind of take a general assessment of what was happening. And the realization is that all the power was gone, but they had food. They had a restaurant downstairs. So they had food, they had freaking ice cream, they had, all kinds of stuff downstairs. And I kept telling them, I'm like, well, the freezers and stuff leave shut, but the stuff that's in the fridge, if you're going to consume it, I would go ahead and tell you to pull it out. If we're going to eat this evening, go ahead and pull that stuff out because the stuff in the fridge is not going to make it. Stuff in the freezer, you've got maybe a day because these were big, restaurant freezers.
Right.
So, but eventually, when we realized the power was not coming back on, they had to start taking stuff out of the freezer too. So,
in our house, we've got a regular refrigerator in the kitchen, nothing fancy. It's got a freezer on top, fridge on the bottom. And we've got a stand-up freezer down in the walkout basement, and it's like a refrigerator, but it's all freezer, the whole thing. And it's very very cold. In it, we keep a minimum of one bag of ice at all times in that. And the reason why we do that is because it's always going to stay cold, and essentially, if the power goes out, you're basically just turning that freezer into a giant cooler. It's got a cold source in there that'll help it, stay colder for longer. My prepper brothers and sisters, we'd like to remind you that the Tops Bunker podcast now has its own YouTube channel where you can listen to all our episodes and watch some videos as well. We have live events planned for this summer and giveaways, so don't miss out. Please stop by the new channel and subscribe. We need those subscriptions and appreciate your support. YouTube.com/Tops Bunker Podcast. Hit the subscribe button and comment as much as you like. Now, back to the show.
Yeah, we have a pretty big deep freeze, or a deep, one of those big freezers out in the garage. And I have a smaller, garage fridge with a freezer on top. But we have a significant amount of meat and ice, and we also keep cold packs in there. So that way, in case anything does happen, I just put a little bit of extra weight on top just to make sure that seal stays good and tight. And unless we have to, I don't open it during a power outage. So, we talked about some of the stuff that you need to do, like have that mindset of the hurricane itself. But let's talk about some of the things that you're going to need. First one, of course, and if you follow, your C's of survival, first we're going to talk about water. So I learned from Helene that water is a huge deal. We were lucky in that the hotel had a very, very large cistern, and the cistern was just slightly above on a small hill of the actual hotel. So even without power, there was still gravity fed water coming into the hotel. So we had clean water, which also gave us the ability to go to the kitchen, and the gas was still on. We were able to cook. We were able to boil water. We were able to do those things. But we always preach about water, and they say, for water, you need to think about 1 gallon per person per day. But you need to think about more than that, because that's just for drinking and, let's just say, cooking.
That's FEMA's a minimum standard, is for absolute survival for your body. Has nothing to do with cleaning, cooking, and that kind of stuff.
No, so you got to think about hydration, but you got to think about sanitation. You got to think about cleaning. You got to think about cooking. You got to think about all those things. So I know a gallon, it seems like a lot of water to some people, but you'd be shocked at how fast that water can go. It can go real quick, especially if you're trying to clean up outside. Clean up the debris from your yard, or cut trees, or anything that may have been downed, or do something. You're going to need to start thinking probably 2 to 3 gallons potentially per person per day. Right now, there's only 2 people in my house. It's just me and Missy. But we also prepare for the fact that our adult kids and grandkids may have to come here because we're centrally located. Next thing, of course, is food. Your stuff that's in the fridge, not the freezer per se, but the stuff that's in the fridge, have a good inventory of it, and just think in your mind, this might be my snacks for at least a day or two, because it's not going to last as long in the fridge as it is in the freezer. So you're going to want to start thinking about non-perishable foods. What do we have on hand that I can use right now before we have to get into this freezer and potentially consume a lot of food all at once? And another thing about, this particular subject is a lot of insurance companies, I know at least ours, if we ever have a power outage and it lasts for more than 24 hours, you can actually call your insurance company and say, hey, I'm in the middle of this storm, or this has happened. They file it under a natural disaster clause, and you could potentially receive an reimbursement from your insurance company for the lost food that you could have consumed during that time frame through spoilage.
Oh, I've never heard of that before.
Yeah, we've had to do it a couple times.
Interesting.
Yeah, we did it. I want to say it was 2017 and 2018 when those 2 storms came through. but yeah, you could potentially do that through your insurance, depending on who your homeowner's insurance is through. So you want to think about battery powered or hand crank radios. An actual NOAA radio. So on one of the reasons why I now have 8 Baofangs is all of my Baofangs can pick up NOAA. And we'll get into communications here in a minute. But NOAA is actually going to be one of your most, I would say, up-to-date news sources when everything else has gone down. We were able to find a really, really old receiver, not an actual radio, but it was just a receiver during Helene, and was able to tune it into NOAA. And what I realized was in the back end of that, on another channel, I could hear Morse code. So a lot of hams, a lot of old school hams, will use Morse code still. So I knew there were ham operators out there communicating. I was eventually able to get a hold of a frequency when I went back up there, and I was able to communicate through a Baofeng radio to the hams up there to call for help and to direct resources. But you're going to need to have some kind of radio. You're going to need to have a way to keep information coming to you. So, your phone may still work. The cell phones typically they're going to work. Hopefully that, the cell towers are still up and they're still operating. It may be a bit delayed. It may not be as fast as you want, but once you lose your Wi-Fi, your phone can still generally work, especially for emergency messages that are getting pushed through the cell towers. A lot of people don't know this, but you could, even if you have absolutely no signal whatsoever and you dial 911, your phone will still operate through the 911 service. Unless everything is completely down, like completely 100% down. So you're going to want, some kind of way of receiving information. You're definitely going to have plenty of flashlights. You can have rechargeable flashlights, and you can have battery operated flashlights, but anything that has to be recharged, you have to have a way to recharge it. So that's where your battery packs come in. That's where your portable power stations come in. And it also can be your vehicle. If your vehicle is kind of like mine, I can plug a USB cord into my truck, and that particular one, even if the truck is not on, will still charge. So that is a way to actually, charge your stuff as well. Mm-hmm. First aid kits, if we've harped on first aid a lot, I would tell you to build your own kit. And if you can't build your own kit, if you just don't know what you're doing, there are resources out there to get really good first aid kits. Don't just go to Walmart and buy a $5 first aid kit. You're going to need more than that potentially. You're going to need extra batteries for anything that needs them. You're going to need to potentially have some way of actually getting you a sound out to somebody. So that's one of these things happens to be a whistle. A lot of people discount whistles, but if you're going along and you're just checking your neighborhood, right? And you look over and you're like, man, that house got trashed. And all of a sudden you hear a whistle from inside of the house, that is going to immediately alert you to something that could potentially be wrong inside of that house. So even though they seem like they're old school and antique, whistles are actually a good thing to have on hand. Another thing that you can use is, and I can't remember the name of them,
whistles run, anywhere from good ones. They run from anywhere from 100 to 125 decibels.
Yeah.
Anything above 125 decibels has irreparable damage to your ears. They're very, very loud.
Yeah. The best kind of whistle that I can tell you to get is either a coach's whistle or a referee whistle. They're ridiculously loud. They are high pitched. They are shrill. And if you blow through one loud enough, you're definitely going to get somebody's attention. So you got to have a way to signal for help. The other one I was thinking of is a lot of people who couldn't afford, say, like a home security system. They have these, I want to say they're battery operated potentially, but basically when the two ends of this connector detach from each other, it emits this horrendously loud, like whistling alert.
Yeah, you're talking about the personal defense alarms that people carry on them.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So you also want to have something to protect yourself from contaminants. A lot of people don't think about that kind of thing, but you got to think back to Louisiana. Oh gosh.
Katrina.
Oh
yeah, that was bad.
And
bad.
My own personal experience in Helene, and I didn't even realize it at the time, but the water that we were looking for when doing search and rescue and search and recovery, there were literally bodies beneath us. There were, I don't want to go too deep into it, but basically all along the river where we were searching and cadaver dogs had already been through, we know for a fact that there were bodies underneath us 3, 4, 5, 6 feet. And that's why I say there is an untold number of missing and dead from Helene. Same thing with Katrina. There were bodies floating through the streets. And it wasn't just people that had been killed in the storm. In Louisiana and a lot of the...
You're talking about the graveyards.
Yeah.
Yep.
Their graveyards are above ground because when they go to dig, it just immediately fills with water. So there were graveyards that had been exposed to the storm, that the grave sites themselves had actually broken open, and there were cadavers floating through the streets. There were bodies all over the place.
That's crazy.
And people don't think about that fact. They don't think about the fact like, my house blew down or this person's house blew down or whatever. They just, the storm, the amount of power that these storms generate, it's unless you've been through it, it's kind of hard to describe. But when I remember, I was stationed in Georgia when Katrina happened, and I remember seeing the footage of the bodies, there was bodies everywhere. It was horrible.
Yeah, I know even from being in like a Dallas Fort Worth area of Texas, when a couple of times hurricanes have come up through the Gulf, and we're talking pretty powerful 3s and 4s, maybe even 5s like Katrina. And they'll come up, and now by the time those storms get to Dallas Fort Worth, which is way up there, they're tropical storms at that point, but they're still very powerful. And you think, well, look, Dallas Fort Worth, it's not the tropics. There shouldn't be tropical storms. Well, that's because it's a hurricane, and the land didn't just completely diminish it or stop it. It's got to keep that energy has to keep going somewhere.
Yeah. Yeah. So some of the things that you can do to protect yourself, having high boots, waterproof, basically galoshes. Muck boots is, one of the brands. Muck is a brand. I prefer a boot called Lite, Lite. But I would tell you first and foremost, don't go venturing into floodwaters. Don't do it. You don't know what's in there. And not just to say that there could be critters in there or there could be a body in there. Once you have enough surface water and it starts to flood, what's up underneath the ground? There's pipes, there's sewage, there is contaminants, there is a whole litany of disgusting things in floodwater. So first and foremost, stay out of floodwater. If you have to go anywhere, have some kind of waterproof boot that is high. Anything that might be in the air, you might want to have a dust mask. We don't want to talk about masks because of COVID or whatever, but have something to breathe through just in case there are contaminants in the air. You're going to want to have something for your hands as well. And you're going to want to have potentially something for your eyes. So you need to protect yourself from contaminants that are not only in the water, potentially in the ground, but also in the air. For your home, you're going to want to have stuff like plastic sheeting. You're going to want to have possibly, if you're in an area that's prone to storms, a lot of those kinds of folks, they have pre-cut, ready to go pieces of plywood to protect the windows. Anything that is in the air that comes loose, like from the wind, it becomes a missile. So, kind of like with a tornado, if those things are not bolted down, locked down, or anything like that, and they get to moving, they're moving at the wind of the speed or speed of the wind.
Yeah, living in Florida, growing up when I was a kid, my dad had already all this was prepared in the garage. Like he had all of the stuff for each individual window and door was already cut, and we're talking 1/2 inch plywood, already cut, ready. It had the little rings on it, the hooks, and everything, so you can just pop it right over the top of the windows, tie it down, and you're ready to go. And it's funny because I remember as a kid, I remember sitting there at the window and trying to look through that little tiny gap that was like just a little bit of light would be shining through just to see what's going on out there. And I remember seeing palm trees that were just going flat,
Yeah.
like standing up and then going flat. And I was like, whoa, that's crazy.
Yeah. The same could be said for areas that are prone to like tornadoes. My sister lives in Oklahoma. She has like a whole home kit that they use in case anything that, like, if they're well enough aware of a storm, they can put these things up. But a lot of times with tornadoes, it just happens. But with hurricanes, and this is the crazy part, as much damage and destruction and death that happens because of hurricanes, we usually get a warning by a couple of days. Like if you're looking at the news and you see that there is even a potential of something hitting the Bahamas, that's a warning, because the Bahamas are like, they're not far at all from Florida. Like it's there. And I know this because of the cruises I've been on. There are people that I met that live in Florida and they have their own boat. And in the morning, they ride this boat out to the Bahamas and then they ride back in the evening. That's how close it is. It's right there. So when you start to hear about these storms, don't wait. Don't wait. Get it done. Like, I don't know why people wait. And then they say, oh my gosh, it came out of nowhere. Bullshit. No, it didn't. You got warnings days ago. And now I know they come out with that weird spaghetti, chart and everything like that. Just imagine that if you hear about a storm and it's about to be a tropical storm, you need to already be prepared. Because if you're on the East Coast specifically, there's most likely you're going to get touched by it in some form or fashion. So the other part about the afterwards is you need to have a way, potentially, especially if you live in a city, you need to have a way to protect yourself. And we all know, a lot of us do know what happened. Yeah, what happened after Katrina. It was bad. It was really bad. And even when we were up in Helene, I walked around during search and recovery with an AR-15. There are people who will take advantage of disasters, and they stole guns and they were out there doing harm. So you need to have a way to protect yourself after the storm. And again, the time to prepare for it was yesterday. And if you didn't do it yesterday, you need to do it now.
Yeah, you're right. That's right. Okay, so 2026 and 2027 is what they're calling an El Nino year. What is an El Nino? Well, we didn't really know much about it a couple of episodes ago, but I've done some research since then. An El Nino is this: the western coast of South America, okay, straight out into the ocean, all the way across that ocean to Australia. Okay, now this is below Mexico, below Panama, down there at the western coast of South America, Peru, that sort of area. That is a gigantic basin of warm water. It's called the South Pacific. Think palm trees and nice, beautiful weather and all that, okay? Well, we have this thing called the trade winds. The trade winds go from that same coastline all the way to Australia, and they push that hot water, that warm water, over towards Australia. They physically push that surface water over there, and it creates sort of a gigantic basin of hot water towards Australia and keeps the cool water coming up off the coast of South America. And that sort of balances out the atmosphere. Okay, so an El Nino is when those trade winds actually weaken. And when they weaken, that warm water flows back over to South America. Okay, it sits there right around South America. The cool water can't come up, and all that heat energy goes up into the atmosphere, and that is what's called an El Nino. Well, 2026 and 2027 they're saying is going to be what's called a Super El Nino. Listen to this.
Beneath the surface of the equatorial Pacific Ocean, a massive shift is currently underway. Meteorologists monitoring the latest supercomputer models for late 2026 are observing a significant spike in sea surface temperatures. The data points towards the development of a powerful climate phenomenon known as a Super El Nino, an event that will severely alter atmospheric circulation and global precipitation patterns through 2026 and into 2027. To understand the mechanics of a Super El Nino and why it impacts weather globally, we first have to understand what El Nino is. Under normal conditions, global atmospheric pressure systems drive a continuous band of air known as the trade winds. Over the Pacific, these winds blow consistently from east to west, from the coast of South America toward Indonesia and Australia. This atmospheric movement physically drags the warm surface water of the ocean westward. Over time, this piles up a vast reservoir of warm water in the western Pacific. Because the warm surface water is continually pushed away from the South American coast, colder water from the deep ocean rises to replace it. This process is called upwelling. It pulls nutrient-rich water from the dark ocean depths up to the coastlines of Peru and Ecuador, supporting one of the most dense and biologically active marine ecosystems on Earth. But, periodically, this cycle breaks down. During an El Nino event, the easterly trade winds weaken. Without that constant wind pressure holding the water in the western Pacific, gravity takes over. Millions of square miles of accumulated warm water begin to flow back eastward across the ocean, riding a deep underwater wave. As this massive volume of warm water hits the coast of South America, it acts like a cap, shutting down the cold water upwelling completely. The ocean surface temperature spikes, and the immense heat stored in the water begins radiating directly into the atmosphere above it. We're talking about extreme shifts in global rainfall, soaring heat waves, and completely rewritten storm tracks. If current forecast models hold, 2026 is setting up to deliver all of these impacts, but worse. How do we know? Well, the severity of an El Nino is measured by the Oceanic Nino Index. It is a system that tracks how much warmer the water in the central and eastern Pacific gets compared to the long-term average. A standard strong El Nino is classified by temperatures reaching 1.5 degrees Celsius above average. But to get the Super El Nino label, that temperature anomaly has to hit 2.0 degrees Celsius or higher. Now, the two most impactful El Nino events in recent meteorological history happened in 1997 and 2015. The 2015 event was massive, peaking at an extreme 2.75 degrees Celsius above normal. But here is what has forecasters concerned. Multiple climate models for late 2026 are plotting a trajectory that actually exceeds 3.0 degrees Celsius above normal. If these projections hold true, it would rank as the strongest El Nino event recorded since the late 1800s. And this isn't just computer modeling. We have the physical data to back it up. Right now, roughly 100 meters beneath the surface of the Pacific, oceanic buoys are tracking a vast pool of water registering 5 to 6 degrees Celsius above normal. As the trade winds continue to weaken, this deep trapped heat is being pushed eastward and thrust towards the surface. Meteorologists believe that the first major indicator we will see is the 2026 Atlantic hurricane season. When the Pacific Ocean warms up this significantly, it creates powerful, high-altitude winds that sweep eastward across Central America and right through the Atlantic basin. This creates something called wind shear. You can think of wind shear as an atmospheric barrier. It physically tilts and tears apart thunderstorms before they can organize into hurricanes. Because of this, The forecast models predict a below-average number of named storms for the Atlantic in 2026. We're looking at roughly 13 storms compared to the historical average of 15. But a lower overall storm count does not mean we can let our guard down. While the deep Atlantic is protected by wind shear, the sea surface temperatures much closer to home, like the Gulf of Mexico and the Western Caribbean, remain exceptionally warm. This creates the perfect breeding ground for sudden, homegrown storms forming dangerously close to the United States coastline. History proves this point. Both 1992 and 2018 were El Nino years, with low overall storm counts, yet they produced Category 5 hurricanes, Andrew and Michael. It only takes one storm hitting the right conditions to change a season. As 2026 transitions into winter, the atmospheric domino effect will shift directly over North America. The heat radiating from the equatorial Pacific alters the high-altitude highways in our sky, specifically the subtropical jet stream. During a Super El Nino, this jet stream becomes highly energized and dips southward over the United States. This repositioning turns the jet stream into a highly efficient conveyor belt for Pacific moisture. If you live on the West Coast, particularly California, this translates to a high probability of frequent and intense atmospheric rivers. While this delivers substantial drought-busting rain, the sheer volume of water predicted by the models greatly increases the risk of severe flooding and structural damage from mudslides. As this energized jet stream tracks eastward, it will bring heavy, beneficial rains to Texas and the Gulf Coast. But when it reaches the southeast, particularly Florida, it encounters a much warmer, more humid air mass. Historically, strong El Nino winters generate a highly volatile severe weather season for the South, elevating the risk of tornadoes and damaging winds from November all the way through March. Conversely, if you live in the northern tier of the United States, the Pacific Northwest, or up into Canada, you will likely see the opposite effect, noticeably drier and warmer than average winter conditions. Across the Atlantic in the UK and Northern Europe, El Nino often drives colder and drier conditions in the later winter months, though the exact impacts can be highly variable. But we have to remember that the Earth is a completely connected system, and the impacts extend far beyond our own backyards. As the Pacific water sloshes eastward, South America will be hit hard. The sudden end of that cold water upwelling we talked about earlier will disrupt the marine food web, devastating local fish populations. Atmospherically, the heat will drive heavy, sustained rainfall, bringing high risks of severe flooding to the western coasts of Peru, Ecuador, and northern Chile. And at the exact same time, shifts in atmospheric circulation could plunge the Amazon basin into a severe drought. Across the Pacific, Australia faces the opposite extreme. Because the warm surface water, and all the storm clouds that go with it, have migrated eastward towards the Americas, the western Pacific is left with cooler water and stable air. This shuts down typical rainfall patterns, leaving Australia highly vulnerable to widespread drought. This lack of moisture, combined with the continent's naturally soaring heat, significantly elevates the risk of severe, catastrophic wildfires. So, yeah, an El Nino event is a massive transfer of thermal energy from the ocean directly into the atmosphere. Because this excess heat is carried globally by the winds, it temporarily raises the baseline temperature of the entire planet. Based on the subsurface ocean data we're seeing today, the sheer thermodynamic output of this Super El Nino suggests that 2027 has a remarkably high probability of becoming the warmest year in recorded history.
Okay. Now, I know people are going to, but well, that's just one little video. No, it's not. I actually found several videos talking about it. This was just the one that I thought sounded good enough to put on a podcast. Now, I did go and check out the WMO. They strongly suggested that the Super El Nino is going to happen 2026, 2027, and it's going to affect weather globally.
Well, I don't know what to say about all of it because one, I really wish mankind would have never messed with the weather to begin with.
Well, I mean, you take a Super El Nino and you add it to cloud seeding,
Oh man.
weather manipulation, and now you're talking about a recipe for massive disaster.
Well, again, it's like I've been saying, the time to prepare was yesterday. If you didn't do it yesterday, do it now. And I would say for a lot of people who call themselves preppers or live the prepared lifestyle, we have a tendency to be close hold. And while we have to take care of ourselves, unfortunately, when it comes to certain things like this kind of weather that we may potentially have in the future, you got to start thinking globally. And I say that because for those of us who are here in the United States has been for many, many years the beacon of hope, if you will. We're going to go help people. We're going to send help.
Oh, yeah.
To pretty much, everywhere and anybody.
By the way, for all y'all non-Americans listening to this podcast right now, that is directly from our pockets.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Every single American, that comes from our paychecks.
Yeah.
That money comes from us. Just saying.
Yeah. It comes directly from our taxes.
Yep.
So, yes, we will help. But I will just tell you here and now, for the average person, nobody's coming to help you. You have to help yourself. Even though you do have to start thinking globally, you have to be able to self-rescue. You've got to be able to do things on your own, and you have to remove from your mind that anybody's coming to help you. And the reality is that we'll go back historically again, Katrina. We'll take Helene. We'll take some of the storms that hit here in North Carolina. Those first responders also have families. Those first responders also have their own lives. And with this weather we've even been talking about it with our gardens. Like the craziness that is happening in our gardens right now is because of this inconsistent weather. But again, I look up in the sky, and every time I see a plane, I have to stop and think to myself, what is that's coming out the back of that plane?
Chemtrails.
Why do we have 6 days worth of rain?
Yeah.
We didn't have rain for almost a month and a half, and then we had rain for almost a week.
Yeah. There's dozens of different things that they call it. When you say the word chemtrail, immediately people check out.
Yeah.
They go, conspiracy theory. You start calling it weather manipulation, cloud seeding, and they have all these scientific terms. And now you're talking about the real deal. You're talking about particleized aluminum to reflect sunlight back into outer space.
Yep.
I mean, all kinds of things that's going on that we're breathing in, that's happening, and they're saying it can't affect us, but it does affect us, and it also changes the weather. It's used as a weapon. We don't have enough time to talk about it right now. We're well over an hour.
Yeah.
So we're probably going to have to bust this out maybe next time.
Yeah, because the FBI guy in my phone and the CIA guy in my basement, they're like, "Yo, dude, you're treading deep."
No, I saw a Department of Homeland Security airplane fly over my house. I know they're listening to something.
They're like, "I know he's down there somewhere. Look at all those ticks. He's running from the ticks." Yeah, guys, but I'll just tell you, there's a myriad of things that you have to do. But the good thing is that, again, even if you're in Florida and these storms go all the way up to New York and to Canada, you have time, but you have to get it done. You can't wait until the storm. If you're in North Carolina like me and you waited until the storm is in Florida, so did everybody else. That's what you're missed out on your opportunity, because when you go to the store, you're going to experience what happens when you don't prepare.
My prepper brothers and sisters, if you have an idea for a show topic or would like to be on the show as our guest, email shtf@topsbunker.com, website topsbunker.com, YouTube Tops Bunker podcast channel, and SpeakPipe, speakpipe.com/tops. Thank you so much for joining us tonight, and remember, stay prepped, stay happy. Thanks for listening, and good night.